Today on the podcast, I'm so excited to have Kait and JJ Tomlin joining me. You guys, it's so good to have you both.
We're excited to be here.
Yeah,
You're
long time no
excited. I'm
talk.
I'm sweating a little bit, but
I know, and we haven't seen you and talked to you in so long, so
it's
this
I
is
know,
great.
it's only
good.
been
Yeah.
like, what, 3 days?
I
Yeah.
know. It was a long
I
three
was just
days.
on your podcast talking about soulmates and soul care and
Yes.
just some really good conversation. And all this stuff, every now and again, we would start talking about different things, and we're like, oh, we got to save that for our on-air counseling session because
Yeah.
I have been so looking forward to having you guys on in this context. I think one
Mm,
of the reasons these episodes have been so interesting and challenging for so many people is because you get a front row seat into real life. I think
mm,
there's a difference between just having an interview, like, hey, what are you guys up to? Tell us about your books and your podcasts and your all the stuff versus like what's actually happening in life and how are we actually healing and growing and learning
mm.
and changing. And that's the good stuff.
Yeah.
So I just look forward to this time, specifically, for people who don't know who you are. Let's just start there. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you guys are doing, how we know each other, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the nitty gritty.
Yes. So we run the Heart of Dating or Heart of Dating. We dropped the and it's a podcast that's become more than a podcast. We now have conferences and events, courses. And I started it single, and that's how you and I met, Deb, because I've been doing this way before JJ came along. I started about 6.5 years ago, almost 7 years ago, and just be as a single person thinking like, hey, I'm still trying to figure this out and really want to date healthily, and I know so many other Christian singles are wondering the same thing, and there's just not a lot of resources about that. So I started that, and it was incredible and just grew and grew and became my biggest passion. And then JJ and I started dating early 2021, actually the same time that my book came out. We met the same week my book came out, I believe. And yeah, we started dating privately because I was like not going to reveal my dating life publicly. Though, Deb, I
Right.
did tell you about him
I
and some of
remember
my
getting
other
a text
friends.
Oh,
at
I didn't
the
know that.
Nashville airport with a voice text and just kind of processing, here's what's going on. I'm dating this guy. He's younger than me. You were kind of like processing. Is this
Yes.
like you're really excited about it? But I think there was still a little bit of like apprehension and it
Uh-huh.
was kind of early on. But I remember where I was exactly when you texted me
Oh
actually.
my gosh, I love that.
I know it's crazy to think that she was apprehensive about dating me and choosing me, but
I know, how
glad she
crazy.
finally came to her senses. No, so yeah, we've been married almost 2 years, which I probably still consider newlywed
Oh,
in a lot
Yeah,
of
for
yes,
ways,
sure.
for sure.
and it's
Though I do
been.
think we are newlyweds, but it feels like so much time has passed because, and maybe we'll get into some of this, but like we, got married, started working together with the podcast,
Yeah, that's a big
and
deal.
like immediately, and lived in a 600 square foot apartment where um we were just like together all the time,
Yeah,
so we were
that's
basically
next
together
level.
24/7.
That is next level pressure cooker. So JJ, what were you doing before you joined Heart of Dating?
Yeah, before I joined, I was working at Amazon. I was a buyer there in Seattle. And then I had transitioned and was working for a big account on Amazon. We did video game peripherals and accessories. So I was just running a big Amazon account, long story short. So
So you literally like quit your job and jumped into Heart of Dating?
yeah, it was a pretty stressful job. It was a little bit more of a rash decision, I would say. I usually don't make decisions that rashly. Usually I like to be a little bit more wise or hey, let's do a little bit
You
more
didn't feel
part-time.
confirmation though.
I did feel
Yeah.
confirmation, but yeah, it was like,
He
hey,
quit his job like 3 months before our wedding,
two
so it
months
was
before the
super
wedding.
Wow.
extreme.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it was like, let's go all in. So it was a huge transition, right? Living together, working together,
A lot
everything
of
new.
changes all
Yes.
at once.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if I
And
remember, you
then,
guys did a lot of traveling too.
yeah, lots of
Lots of
Hit the
traveling.
road.
Yeah, I'd
Mhm.
say in the past year and a half, married, worked together, had a kid, bought a house, moved across the country, like lots of big major life events all in a short amount of time. So
Right.
we've never really had just a easy, normal season, under our belt. So I think that's what we're kind of excited for as we become parents, settle in Tennessee. My family's here. It's a little bit more stable. We can kind of focus on the foundation of our marriage a little bit more.
Yeah.
Um, but I personally, so I don't know if you do Enneagram. Uh, I think it's just helpful as a paradigm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm 7 wing 8, very similar to JP in that sense of I like chaos. That's when I can kind of step up and, figure out a plan, be a little bit more spontaneous. I'm totally comfortable with like the building burning around me, like the "this is fine" meme. I'm like, this is great. Like, I think it's exciting. And Kate's like the opposite of that.
I
So,
do
What's
not like
Kate?
the chaos.
What's your Enneagram?
Actually, I'm a 3 wing 4. And
Okay.
it's funny because we've talked a lot about how especially in chaos or like in moments of like something bad is happening in the moment, I actually freeze. Like it overwhelms me so much that I don't even know what to do. So that's something that does happen to me. JJ is always laughing because like if something bad happens in the moment and you have to react, I'm like frozen, like deer in
Yeah.
headlights. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know what to do. What are we doing? And JJ's like, Kate, do something. I'm like, ah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to
hmm
know. So, so you're almost at year 2, and now
hmm
you have a baby.
hmm
Uh, what have you found to be the main conflict cycle? Like, if you had to narrow down the fight that tends to happen most often, obviously it's different things each time, but as far as like a theme, what do you think that theme would be?
yeah, like where we get stuck in the conflict
Or one of our
cycle.
biggest kind of conflicts that repeats.
One of the conflicts that repeats
Oh, okay.
again and
Uh-huh.
again and again.
Yeah. I would
Why are
I
you
have
laughing?
one.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
like
sure. I'm sure you got plenty.
I know, I definitely have a list. No, I would say one is definitely for me, distraction and being a person of your word. Where you know, and we've definitely we talk about this a lot. We help other singles manage and go through these things, but JJ and his familial dynamic was more the peacekeeper. So
Mhm.
in moments where I might be upset about something or coming at him, and I need to work on how I come at him with certain
Oh, we'll
things,
talk about that later. Don't
for
worry.
sure.
Yeah.
His tendency might be to like, okay, let's wrap this up. I'm sorry, put a band-aid on it. And then I'm like, okay, fine. I'm gonna now trust you to do it differently the next time. And then if it happens again very soon after, like I get that much more frustrated, more frustrated. And then my reactions become even worse through time because now I
So,
have
so
less
what would be
patience.
the thing?
Um,
What do you feel like that thing is? You
that
mentioned
happens in work.
distraction.
Yeah, that happens a lot in work. It happens in day-to-day life with responsibilities, like ownership of certain things around the house. So we recently did something called Fair Play. Have you heard of that, Deb?
No.
It's like this card deck. Somebody, I forget who created it. And it's like you take all these different responsibilities you could potentially have in a house under your life. You go through
Wow.
this deck and you decide who owns what.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
fascinating.
yes. And because we were having a lot of issues with like who owns
That's
what.
a fascinating strategy. And then I mean, how many things, how many cards are there?
There's like 70,
I was gonna
80.
say there
There's
has to be at
lots.
least like 100.
Yeah,
There's
Yeah,
there's
there's
a
a
so many
lot.
things. How do you
Lots.
well,
keep
and
track
there's
of all your cards?
we have decks. Well, some of them are like, like seasonal responsibilities and some are like daily responsibilities,
So
like
do you give
taking
them
out the
at
trash.
random, or do you just everybody chooses their own cards?
You
We
go through, you take
we
an
go
hour
through, yeah.
and you say, okay, like who is owning this from start to finish?
Wow, this is fascinating.
I
Okay.
know. And it's
So
been
you
really
guys divvied
helpful.
up the deck
Yeah,
Yeah.
about
we
50
did.
50.
I had more cards actually.
Actually, you had like one or two more cards, which
Yeah.
was
Okay,
She
so
shocking.
was
he's a
very
couple more
surprised.
cards than you.
Well, because the narrative too, up until that point was I do so much more
Me
of
as
the
in me.
work. You
Right.
like
Kate does,
right.
yeah. And you like to just
So
have fun and play.
Yeah.
yeah, but and then when we divvied up the cards, I was like, oh well, what do you know?
Yeah.
Well, well, well.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. Okay. I'm starting
But
to feel the
trans
dynamic already.
but yeah, well, no, good. I mean, we do a lot of joking, but there is, the truth and the opinion and the narrative underneath that. And up until that point, a lot of the dynamic was I felt like I had a mom and not a wife,
Hmm.
someone always behind me, someone always double, triple checking. And I think the ownership cards were really helpful, actually. I've been shocked at how helpful they've been for me in the sense of I never really felt like I had input or a piece of ownership in the house. And so when that was kind of like my excuse or hall pass, it was pretty easy to just kind of turn off and not really be as helpful or proactive
Hmm.
or do things consistently well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that theme was responsibility and ownership.
That, yes, when it comes to work and like daily life tasks, that has been a big little area for us. That's definitely grown with having a kid because now there's more little things and who's getting her bag together before we leave,
Right.
who's taking care of the childcare when we need childcare, like just who's owning these things so it's not up in the air. Or like we ran into a few times when we were out beginning of having the baby where one of us would forget the bottle and we both looked at each other like, well, didn't you get it? No, didn't you get it? And so there was no clarity on who was owning that thing. And I was like, hey, my mental load is at capacity. I need you to do more.
Yeah.
And so
Got it.
that's,
So responsibility and ownership kind of came up as a conflict theme, but I also heard you say distraction.
yeah.
So similar in the sense of just not feeling like JJ was giving you his full attention.
Yes, definitely. And like even in moments where he might agree to things, I felt like he's just saying it sometimes to get over the conflict versus actually wanting to change whatever he's agreeing to. Distraction has been a big thing. I did want to bring up something that has been kind of shocking in our marriage. I don't know if it's the
Well,
best
hey,
time.
honestly, I've just been thinking about this. I think one thing we really challenge ourselves is to be more vulnerable than we are transparent. I don't think that kind of being gently transparent about things is really helpful for other people. And so I'm okay being more vulnerable
Okay. Yeah.
moving forward instead of kind of tiptoeing around.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
so you can be
He's giving you
more,
permission. Like,
yeah,
just say it. Just do
Oh,
it.
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, the one big thing, definitely distraction. If I could pinpoint one thing that's so frustrating for me is JJ has a tendency to be on his phone a lot. He has a tendency where if he's locked in on like his phone or something or like football, that's a big one in football season. Like there is nobody else is getting in him. Like and that's really tough.
You were
And I
about to
knew
say there's something really shocking. Is that the shocking thing?
the shocking thing was how much it affects our everyday life because if I want to have dedicated time talking to him or run something by him, I have to make sure he's not on his phone because he definitely can't listen while he's on his phone.
Right.
um
I could see
and
that. Which do you think you can,
I
Kate?
can a little bit more. Probably not. I don't think anyone is probably great at multitasking, but um JJ, I don't know. You definitely can't do two things at once.
So
The
let's say there's
football is
a
one that's
game
big though.
on in the background
Hmm.
or even a TV show. Let's say you're
Yeah,
watching a TV show, watching a game, you turn to him and you're trying to have like some sort of a conversation. It's not going to happen.
right. And not only that, it's not even just when the game is on. It's that if we're going into the football conversation, it's fantasy football. It's being on the phone, updating all the fantasy stuff. And when we first now this will be our fourth football season coming up. The first year we were not living together, so didn't really notice it that much. first year of marriage, he was only in one fantasy league, I believe. Okay. Last year, he was in three fantasy leagues. And I noticed a significant difference because now he's checking his phone, this app called Sleeper app, which is like, I don't know, it's where they do fantasy football stuff all of the time, to the point of, I'm going to give the Godzilla movie example. We've never talked about this with a therapist, so I think it's interesting. But we were going to see the movie Godzilla -1, which JJ
So
really
good.
wanted to see. And
Great movie if you haven't seen it, by the way.
and I was open
I'll
to
take
seeing
your
it. I was
word
like,
for it.
so we went and saw Godzilla -1 in the theater, and there was a game on. It was a Monday night, and JJ's in the movie theater constantly on his phone checking the game score, the app, and I was so mad. I was like, we're in a movie. Like, why are you on your phone? If you want to watch this game, we shouldn't be at the movie.
Why were you mad? Because talk us through this, because
Yeah.
you're at a movie. It's not like you're going to talk anyway. So the
Yeah.
issue of him giving you attention is off the table, right? It wasn't
Mhm.
about attention because there's a movie. You're not really going to talk anyway, but it signified something, right? So what was
Yeah.
it really like? What was making you upset? What were you telling yourself that was making you so mad?
Mm, well, I think at that point I had already begun to resent football and his relationship with football. So his desire to and his relationship with his phone is I've begun to resent. So I think it's more of like the principle of like, hey, we're together on a date night, and I came to this movie knowing that you would want to see this movie. I'm
Like
here
you
mainly.
sacrificed, you don't
Right.
really want to be there anyway. It's not the movie
I
you would
was
have
like, I was
chosen.
open to it, but I was doing it mainly because I knew he really wanted to see it. And there he is just on his phone checking football half the time. And I was like, this is annoying.
So how did you handle that?
I was like, babe, get off your phone. Like, we're watching a movie. And then he would keep doing it. And I was like, oh my gosh, please get off your phone. I don't really remember what I said. You probably remember better.
Do you
Is
remember,
it
JJ?
well, what I do remember is I think it was a little bit more of a casual, like not date night. Because date nights for us, there's like two nights. There's just connection nights where we just do a common activity together and
Uh-huh.
we bond. And then there's date night where it's like I put time and effort, we're connecting. I'm owning this night to connect with you and
Yeah.
pursue you.
Or vice versa.
Right.
Yeah.
This was more like connection night. Let's
That's
go
true.
watch a
Yeah, I was
movie.
more of a connection
I
night.
think she was just like very much like this is a very loaded word, nagging me during the movie about like why are you on your phone? Like can you not just focus? Why are you on football? What is so important about it?
Because it's
Yeah.
not just in the movie, it's like all the time. And even to the point of
Well, like
going out.
if we're watching a TV show that Kate wants to watch together, she will be very upset if I'm on my phone while we watch the TV show. That's
Well,
like
only because I'm like, well, I'm watching this because we want to watch it together. If otherwise, I'll watch something else that I just
the
want to
same thing with like the movie, right?
Right.
Yeah.
so, and then like, because it just had that point, like, had taken over a lot. Like, I mean, we'd be in church and JJ would have it out. We'd literally be in small group and JJ be checking his football stuff.
Very well, okay, yes.
Not good.
That was very much, listen, this sounds
Sorry,
funny. I've
babe.
come a
I'm just
long
being
way. No,
super
no, no,
honest.
not to be defensive. I had serious issues in the beginning of like why I was that guy watching sports at the table. I was that
Give me an
guy
example of Dallas with
frequently.
my brother.
Like we're in Dallas visiting family, my first time meeting your brother and his fiance. They're like, do you guys want to go drive around and look at houses? This is my first time in Dallas. I'm
My
like,
brother wanted to tour him
yeah.
around Dallas to see Dallas.
I'm like very much not. I would much rather stay at home, hang out, connect, have football on, play a card game. I don't really care to drive around the neighborhoods and see houses. So I'm like, sure, that's fine. And so while we're like out touring, he's pointing out neighborhoods. I'm sitting behind him and I have my phone right
He's
behind his
watching
chair and
games.
I'm watching games or I
My
just have
brother
it
does that
on.
now. He's literally in the back watching games. My brother's showing him different things around Dallas. Meanwhile, JJ's like, uh-huh, uh-huh, and watching his football game in the back. And I'm like, this is your first time meeting my
Yes.
brother. He's taking you around to show you different things. and you're on your phone watching a game? Like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I'm getting a picture here for this. So, JJ, you say like I feel like yeah, I've come a long way, or at least a little way over the years. Um, and it's specifically sports brings you a
Golf
lot
is
of
another
joy.
big one. Yeah, golf and football. And golf is actually playing, not just watching.
And sometimes more joy on what is going on in the game than what's happening in the present, right? Like you don't want to be in a car driving around. So your default is to go on an app and there's something
Yeah.
there.
And that's it. Yeah. In that scenario, being more honest, I did not want to go. Uh, it did not really sound fun. I had no desire. And so I felt like, fine, we'll go. But honestly, I would much rather be watching these games on TV and chilling at home than looking at these houses saying, oh, wow, how much do you think that one's worth? Right. Like, that didn't really sound,
What about in other scenarios when there's fun happening in front of you as well? Like, how do you
yeah.
gauge?
Um,
Like I think of a Friendsgiving night where we were at a Friendsgiving and my friend hosted it. And it's tons of people, Thanksgiving meal, and JJ's on his. I'm sorry, I'm probably
no,
coming at
it's
you too
good. No, I
hard.
don't mind at all. I think, listen, there's probably two things. There's a difference between checking fantasy scores, briefly checking in on something that's ongoing and important. There's a time and place to do it in the bathroom versus the dinner table. And then there's like watching a game like locked in while everyone
Right.
else is connecting in front of me. I'd say the checking in, there's definitely appropriate and inappropriate times to do that. Like in church, when you're a single guy to a bachelor, you can develop some really immature and unhealthy habits like watching football during church on your phone while there's a message going on. Um, and that's what I would do. I wouldn't have like watching, but I'd be checking it frequently, like checking the score, checking points. That's what I was doing in the movie theater that night. That's typically what I do more frequently is just check scores and points versus having it up. I'm like solely locked in and watching at a dinner table or there's lots of fun things in front of me. But it's a good question. How do I gauge which is more fun? Because
Yeah.
this has been a big journey for me. I recently got diagnosed with ADHD and
ADD or ADHD?
ADHD and I
Hyperactive?
yeah, and I have really struggled with like going with and choosing what's impulsive and fun versus what's important. Uh, and that statement probably proliferates through my whole life. Work habits, connecting with Kait, choosing what's more important and fun, and that rush of dopamine and spontaneity over what is like what I know I need to be doing in that moment.
And
Um,
not only that, I think you have to understand, and I was going to ask you about ADHD right when you were saying just his struggle to stay focused when you're trying to talk about something. Oftentimes, you need a higher level of stimulation to stay engaged when you have ADHD because your brain is kind of like sleepy. Your frontal lobe is kind of sleepy. So it needs more than the average person to stay stimulated, to stay active.
Mm-hmm.
That part. It's like I need extra dose of stuff to keep that part of my brain active. So it's like layers of stimulation to keep you feeling normal, to keep you feeling stimulated, essentially, versus bored. So it's not just the Enneagram 7 here. It's
Mm-hmm.
also the components of ADHD, what's going on in your brain, the excitement, the need for that like you said, the dopamine boost, the stimulation that you might not get naturally that others might have. So some of this is not a lack of love, it's a lack of skill. And I think you have to remind yourself that, Kait, when it's happening in the moment. But at the same time, it sounds like sports has become that dopamine reward addiction loop because it's that extra boost of what's going on. This is exciting. We don't know what's going to
mm,
happen.
mhm.
It's almost like I hate to use this term loosely, but this like self-medicating piece of just that boost of excitement, stimulation, fun to kind of keep yourself at a level of excitement, your brain at a level of stimulation. And I know this to be true from the clients that I've worked with and the ADHD diagnosis in my own home with one of my sons, just kind of seeing the difference with screens and what screens mean to him versus what screens mean to the other children. It's a very different dynamic because of that stimulation that you're getting. What's it like when you cut screens out of your life? Have you ever tried that? I'm just curious for a season, for an hour, for like, hey, we're just having dinner, everybody put their phones away. Or is that something that you haven't really tried yet?
Um, it's a good question. I would say two things. Number one, I don't ever proactively initiate that kind of thing,
I could imagine.
right?
I'm not shocked by that.
Yeah,
I usually
shocker.
initiate it.
But when we do
Shocker.
it and I do participate, I really like it. I really enjoy it. I find my body is a lot more relaxed. I think sometimes I don't realize how tense I am when I'm in that constantly like I call it like consumption state.
Mm.
Um, I've done centering prayer lately, the past, let's say month and a half, and I try to do it 3 times a day. And I've especially noticed the morning and noon one are really helpful because I just like I don't realize the kind of state I am until I stop and just pause for 5 minutes
Yeah.
and I get back into my body. Like I always thought that kind of the body talk, get back into your body, like the Dr. John Van App, and I just kind of thought that was a little bit more feminine in nature and didn't really ever apply to guys until I kind of started realizing how just unaware I was of my body. So I would say that number one, I don't ever do it, but when I do, I actually really do enjoy it and realize like how undistracted or how I guess aware I am of just my surroundings and my body and how I'm feeling in people. And then two, I would say, because I've been praying about this a lot lately. Uh, there's one big thing that happened about a month ago that I can open up about that kind of causes journey. Because I had to admit to myself, like Kate could nag me about it and complain about it and bother. And we could like, and until I wanted to admit this really is a problem and something needs to change. It's kind of easy too to admit it's a problem and then do nothing about it.
Yeah, because there's levels of problems. It's not like we're
Right.
talking about porn. It's not like we're talking about drugs.
Exactly. It's a very easy one to kind of justify,
Yeah,
especially if you play a
that's what
comparison
always
game.
frustrates me
And
is
Yeah.
I
then
think
it's easy to normalize with our culture. Like, oh,
mhm,
yeah,
Yes.
all guys, yeah,
love football.
wives and husbands and football. But that's not actually what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
Hmm.
or even look at your partner and just say you're just being controlling. You're just you hate when I have fun and don't give you attention. Like just you're being dramatic. It's very easy, basically. I think as humans, we're just amazing at giving ourselves excuses when we want to. I would say for me, because I was praying about it. I don't know if I shared this with you. Uh, I just asked God to show me when this maybe started, or like when this kind of like distraction with work. I really struggle with work sometimes. I'll do 7 out of 10 things. Mundane things are incredibly difficult. They take so much effort. And unless there's a pressing or deadline or urgency, it's just hard to do things on time. Um,
Sounds like about right for ADHD.
yeah. But here's the thing that's crazy, Deb, is I just felt like God just highlighted the second and I can remember it. It was like it was literally like this new world and reality and drug for me and my brain. When I got my first iPod Touch at like what 14 years old, my life, my grades, the way I showed up at school, the way I just worked fundamentally changed and it's never been the same since that moment,
Mm.
since I've had a device in my hand. And
Changed for the negative or for the
I would say
positive?
negative. Oh yeah, absolutely negative. Um, And it almost, as the way I feel it in my brain and body, it almost feels like a drug. It just has felt so good since then, as far
Mhm.
as this like consumptional aspect of my like mind and soul has just had something to feed on like incessantly since that
Yeah,
moment.
like I said, it's almost like the stimulant
Yeah, it's like this kind of
medication.
stimulant. Yeah, like hunger and appetite has just been like incessantly fed, but also not. It's like eating cotton. It's literally like eating cotton candy, you know?
Right.
Um, and so since that moment, right, like I always did really well in school. Until that moment, I probably would have like, if the material was engaging for enough. And this is what I told my psychiatrist when I saw him. It's like 10% of life is ultra engaging and interesting and spontaneous and fun, whether it's work, life, whatever it is. And that 80-90% can just be so boring, you know? And so, like, Kait might have my attention and literally she'll have it for about 15 seconds. And in that 15 seconds, I'm like processing, is this interesting enough or is this boring? And right at that 15-second mark, it's like, subconscious decisions made, and
Right.
I'll like just turn off. Like if it's like
Now, it's not
logistics or
that
something,
she's
yeah,
not important. We're just talking about stimulation.
probably, yeah,
Okay.
interesting and stimulating. Yeah.
So I think that's
Doesn't feel
important.
that way, but
Exactly. It's important for you, Kate, to understand, even what JJ might not fully understand yet, is that we're talking about stimulation. And when you have been used to heightened levels of stimulation, because there's always something on in the background, when you take that away, everything almost feels like it's not as colorful anymore. It's like everything
mhm,
with a neon. I have to keep things in neon all the time. Ironically, some people do this in different forms. Like that's where drugs come in, that's where
mm,
pornography comes in. Also, that's where arguments come in because for some people, arguments are
mm.
stimulating. For the
Oh,
ADHD brain, especially, it's like poking and like getting somebody in front of me excited and aroused, picking a
Is that
fight
why you do that too?
can
is that why
feel
I,
He doesn't
stimulating.
pick fights, but he definitely pokes at me like in a joking way. And I feel like you do like that. That's so interesting because I'm like, why
I
I
mean,
say
it
no
could be
too
But
many
like,
here's the
times
thing.
and
Here's
he'll
what
keep
you need to
going.
understand, Kate. Big, loud responses feed into the dopamine loop.
Ah,
for me,
interesting.
When she's big and loud, it almost gives that boost of stimulation. Not, you probably don't, it's not like you're like, please yell at me. But without you even realizing it, it's feeding a loop. It's like loud stimulation, poke, 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 loud stimulation. It just keeps the cycle
Oh wow,
going.
that's
It
so
fuels
interesting because I
something
definitely get
underneath
loud.
the
Mm,
surface. The worst thing you can do in a dynamic like this is yell, scream, feed the dopamine loop, add an extra
mm,
layer of stimulation in an unhealthy way.
it's
You know
mm.
what I
interesting.
mean?
Yeah, because I
Wow.
do feel like well, I grew up in a very playful house, and especially it's weird because I've noticed my mom, she's here local. I can play with my mom, I can scare her, I can poke with her, and she laughs, and it's a genuine connection. But when I do that with Kait, it's not the same.
She
It's
feels
like,
bullied,
are you trying to
picked on.
aggravate me? Yeah. Are you trying to get me upset? Why would you do that? And
Yeah.
I'm like, I think it's the innocent of it is there is a genuine attempt to connect in the playfulness, right?
Mhm.
But I think,
A few months ago, you did tell me that you think I'm boring.
did I say it like that or
You
okay, yeah.
did. You did. You were like, it's kind of like
Maybe serious, like you're the
oh,
most serious
serious.
person
Yeah.
I've ever
I
met.
maybe I
Like,
translated it to boring,
yeah,
but like I'm
Yeah, you
serious.
probably interpreted it that way.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Just yeah, and I didn't really feel like, and now I can see, I mean, especially after the past 20 minutes, how this is coming from an unhealthy place. So I guess like there is a desire for playfulness. And then there's also, but I've had to work out of only playfully connecting. And, you know, for me, intimacy and deep connected talk with Kait, friends, you
Yeah.
know, was just so not preferred. Like I could do it. It just was not my preference. And I've really had to grow. Like I actually genuinely enjoy a deep, connected, vulnerable
Well,
conversation
that's the
amongst friends
thing.
now.
That's when you start taking away the faux stimulation, you have to actually start to create real stimulation. And that takes a little bit more work. That takes a little bit more awareness and insight. What's actually fulfilling and fun versus what's a quick fix to make me feel like fun in the moment. Fun in the moment and fulfilling aren't necessarily similar things. So when you're just fueling fun, quick fixes, stimulation, you're not filling the tank the way that it needs to be filled. So it's going to be depleted a lot more often. But when you actually get to the root of like, okay, how do I fill myself in a deep, meaningful, long-lasting way? It makes it a little bit easier to not feel like you have to chase the fun. But I also feel like there's going to be, this is a journey. Like you said, you recently got diagnosed. How recent?
Like,
A week ago.
yeah,
A week ago. This is
Yeah.
fresh.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
Well,
this
it's
this
something.
is
Yeah.
very meaningful because this is a journey of figuring this out. Like this is something I don't want you to take lightly and just be like, yeah, whatever. It's just a distraction issue. ADHD is not a distraction issue. ADHD is an inability to prioritize. That's what it is. It's not you get distracted easily. It's there's so much coming at you. It's like, okay, what do I prioritize here and what do I not prioritize? It's like a
That's
frontal lobe
interesting. Yes.
prioritization process. And so I challenge you to take this seriously. I also think, Kait, how you respond to this is
Yeah.
important. You're either going to fuel a negative cycle and you guys are just going to feel distant, or you're going to help each other figure this out because this is pretty important.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to communicate through this, how to communicate your needs in a way that isn't just critique and criticize, how to see some of this issue as a deficit in skill, not a deficit in love, so that you don't take it so personally and get crushed by the rejection that you're feeling. That isn't actually rejection. It's just JJ having to figure out how to become his healthiest self. So there's a lot that could go wrong, but there's a lot that you guys could do right and kind of come through this like with a much better understanding of each other. Like ADHD is important as a diagnosis, not as an excuse. It's important for awareness, not just to kind of excuse unhealthy behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think what's been challenging is that, there's probably two things. There's the individual ownership of, I've always known it's been a problem, but it's never really been a big enough problem or caused enough pain in my life or Kate's life and my daughter's life until recently. Um, and that's probably what I would say is like that's where marriage has been probably the most challenging is there's all these habits and things that you've known all along the way your whole life.
You're
I
right.
should probably change and
You're
grow and
right.
heal out of. But until the pain, especially, I don't know if this is a gender thing. Typically in my life and the men around me, it's until it's painful enough and the cost is enough, we're not really going to change unless we're just incredibly humble and that wise to pursue health out of, wisdom for me is the ability to learn lessons without having to experience the pain of the lesson. So I see something happen in someone else's life or on the forecast. I'm like, I don't want to learn that lesson the hard way. Let me go ahead and learn and grow, the right
Right.
way.
And
But
everything we engage in is serving us in some way, but it's also sabotaging us in some way. And
yeah,
once we open our eyes to the fact that this is actually sabotaging me more than it's serving me, and that takes time sometimes and other people to recognize, because we're going to make excuses for why it's actually serving me until there's enough evidence that it's actually
yeah.
sabotaging.
And well, and for me,
And and I'm so glad that you, JJ, specifically are digging into this because there's a lot of components to how your brain works that are very different than how Kait's brain works. And things that you have to learn to overcome and override in different ways. It's not simply forgetfulness. There's a little bit more going on, but the key is taking ownership of that. Like we said, it's not an excuse. I'm just different, but taking ownership of that with lifestyle changes, with medication as necessary, with learning the mental overrides and how to recreate some of the neural pathways that you might need with habit forming, things that somebody else might not have to do, certain exercises that somebody else might not have to do to be at baseline that you do have to do. And I know it can feel hard and unfair, you know, but if we think about it, everyone has their struggle. Everyone has something. Everyone has their baggage. Everyone has their deficits that they bring into marriage, and marriage just exposes it. And we can either feel awful and ashamed about it and hide from it, or own it, acknowledge it, and then do something about it. Whether it's Kate's rejection wounds that she's got to face and deal with, whether it's your ADHD that was never diagnosed, probably should have been in childhood, but never was. And now you're dealing with the effects of that. These things are so important and difficult. And I can only imagine how difficult this has been for you guys in different ways. But I also feel like the beauty is that you have a path forward now. And it's like, okay, this is what's going on, and here's how we can start to address it. This is going to be a team effort in a lot of ways.
I think I'm just personally having a hard time, like, with trust, like, because I think there's been a lot of issues in our marriage where JJ might, like I said to the beginning, agree to change something or like do something a little different. But I find that it's pretty short-lived and not lasting. And so I think there's like some fear within me of like, I'm
Right.
so glad that he's gotten the diagnosis. He is doing some different things, but I think I just fear like, how long is this going to last? Because I
Right.
like silly, maybe small example. Last night, Eleanor was going through a sleep regression, and I hadn't been sleeping well the last few nights, so I slept in the other room. JJ slept in our room with the monitor on, and then I hear her crying in the night and realize she's been crying like maybe for 20 minutes, and I don't know. I'm just like, can I trust that like you're for sure going to take care of her in that moment and not like leave her? And that like I have this like fear within me that like I have to be like hyper vigilant, hyperactive, like like I can't really
Right.
rest. And so I'm
Right. Which
like
isn't good for you, because then you're feeling heightened all the time. You're not getting the rest that you need. You're feeling more bitter and resentful.
mm-hmm,
Um, I think a part of this is obviously, without ever putting Eleanor at risk, but it is learning to give JJ what's his and leaving it,
mm,
because this is his journey. It's so easy to start filling in the gaps and then getting resentful rather than letting the gaps be exposed and allowing JJ, empowering JJ to step in and fill in those gaps in the way that he wants to and knows that he needs to.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes it takes those things to get exposed for him to be like, oh, okay, I see this is more sabotaging than serving. But if you're Kate constantly covering that up by filling in the gaps or just spewing bitterness and resentment,
Right.
the gap's not going to get exposed in a way that he's like, oh, this is more sabotaging. I want to do something about this. This is more sabotaging than serving. How can I adjust? How can I take ownership? You want to give him opportunities to take ownership by not taking as much ownership. And it sounds like you guys are figuring that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely
But
tough.
this is just the beginning of the journey. Honestly, you're both going to have to learn a lot. There's a lot of good books to kind of help you figure out what this looks like, how it plays out in marriage, what can you expect, what options are there for treatment and healing. Dr. Amen has some incredible resources for
Like him.
ADHD. He's wonderful. There's a book called Driven to Distraction that's also really good for managing adult ADHD. But again, it's like this is a journey that you guys are on together and figuring it out together and not interpreting it the wrong way, Kate. Not interpreting it as a lack of love, a lack of care, a lack of he's not interested in me. I'm boring, like you said earlier. That's not actually what he said, but I see how that interpretation can happen when you're kind of feeling all that insecurity and rejection and all of that stuff underneath the surface. I'm glad we met because I feel like we're at a point where this could either go really wrong or really right. And you guys are kind of at a fork in the road of which way it's going to go and how you're going to navigate it.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think it's like it's bound to happen, right? Like every couple at some point,
Absolutely.
like the trauma, the Achilles heel of the personalities and their soul that have just been neglected is gonna blossom to a point where it's like, all right, there is a fork in the road and
Yeah,
things
we all
really
have
have to
them.
change, right?
We all
And
have
so,
them. When God
yeah,
starts to expose our weaknesses in marriage, marriage is a mirror to our wounds. And then what?
right, because and that's the challenge for me, and I think many men and women as singles is I never really put myself in positions enough where everything was exposed in that sense. Like I was
Like
not
this would
in
affect you that
right,
Right.
I was in not in consistent enough discipleship or deep enough friendship where people had those glimpses into all of who I was
Yeah.
and depended on me for something deeply and consistently enough where I failed them. And
Right.
then they would hold me. And that's where marriage has been that gift. I think, my challenge is like sometimes it's really hard to hear feedback from someone if you're not really sure if they're for you,
Yeah.
uh, or for the marriage. And it's just coming out of a place of anger, resentment, vengeance. Like Kate's not out for vengeance, but it's like there's more of a desire to like we talk about changing and growing and sometimes I wonder it's like do you want this for me in the marriage or do you just want this so that like your life is better, um which is a convenient narrative, right? Because the second I kind of start second guessing what's her
Right.
motive and or
Right.
like
It
she's just
can't,
upset and angry about everything, so this is just
yeah, it gives you an out. Now, not that Kate doesn't need to assess that. Is this coming out of what wound? Why am I overreacting? Why am I
Yeah.
reacting in such a big way? What's going
Mhm.
on, inside of me? Um, that's important to assess. But you're right. It's easy to make your own interpretation of where it's coming from for her, and then it gives you a reason to not have to work as
I
hard.
Yeah, and it sounds listen, I know how it sounds, but it's a lot easier to discard. I grew up with around like a unhealed eight as my dad. And so one of my ways to kind of survive and cope was like, all right, this is clearly coming from a crazy place.
Right, right, right. So when you
Everything that
sense a
you're
little bit of
saying,
that, you can
yeah,
just
everything you're saying
invalidate
is
it.
just
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
and I can see how that's really deeply affected my marriage. Because it kind of just gives me like I sit on this little judgment throne and I can just say,
right.
this is
Yeah,
coming
it's
from loving
true.
and
It's
kind
true.
place,
It's
or this
true.
is coming from your trauma and your feedback. It's not really valid right now. And that's why, honestly, seriously, it's really easy to discard feedback or agree to things and not really care about it. If she was coming from that place, and I'm like, it wasn't really important. It was just her trauma in the moment, or, she was acting a little crazy in that moment. Versus like if she sat down and calmly and
Right.
kindly and respectfully asked me questions, was curious, and that honestly would, I feel like, make me so much more bought in and
Yeah,
feel like I'm a partner, in this
right.
situation.
Right.
And I really do. And it would be really hard to let her down and go back on my word,
Yeah,
when it was something that I actually meant versus something to just appease.
right. I think that's a really important part to this dynamic too, Kate. and how
It's
you're
definitely my
bringing it to the
problem.
table.
Yeah,
We'll have
my
to assess that in
overreaction.
part two
I know,
because
Yeah.
right? I
we got
know.
JJ covered in part one. Part two, we got to focus a little bit on Kait
Oh gosh.
and her actions and overreactions.
No,
But
I've
you
never
guys,
overreacted.
I wish we had more time to chat through it, but this has been really eye-opening, I think, for a lot of
Mhm.
people, and just trying to see their own dynamics and how things play out and what might be going on underneath the surface and what's getting revealed and how are we handling what's getting revealed. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate your vulnerability and your willingness to join me for this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I felt like I was a little bit more on the chopping block, which is good because I'm for myself, I need that. And then two, if there's any guy listening or girl listening who's just struggle with this, uh, I hope, you're inspired in the sense of you don't have to make a grand mistake like I did to learn, this lesson of this needs to be addressed because God wants what's best for you and he wants you to be the most healthy version of yourself, to
Mhm.
Yeah.
connect with him, to lead your life, to connect with your spouse, to be a parent. And I think that's probably what I would go back and tell myself is, hey, God wants you, right, to be that man he created you to be. And what's in the way of that, if you really had to admit?
The spotlight fell on you today, but next time it'll fall on Kait.
Yeah.
You guys, I think we're gonna need to do a part two, okay?
I'm
I'm
so
I'm
open
We're
to
down.
it.
gonna
Thank you,
flip the
Deb.
spotlight, and I think it'll actually be good for us to meet too and just kind of keep in touch.
Yeah,
I'm
Yeah.
invested in
100%.
this journey,
Same
so
time,
I'm
same time next
invested in you
week.
guys
Yeah.
and your future and the health of your marriage and your legacy. So count me
Oh,
in.
oh, thanks, Deb. We
Okay, where
love
can
Thanks,
you.
Deb.
people find you guys, connect with you, and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, heartofdating.com, Instagram, Heart of Dating. Kateness is my handle. JJ Tomlin is his. But yeah, on our website, our podcast is called Heart of Dating. So you can find that everywhere. All the things Heart of Dating.
Sounds good. Connect with Kait and JJ, you guys, especially if you're in the dating season. They have such amazing advice about getting healthy from the inside out and starting that process because marriage is hard. It's a pressure cooker. And the little things we bring in from dating get magnified times 100 in marriage. And so
Totally.
do yourself the favor of starting the work early. Connect with JJ and Kait and Heart of Dating. I love you guys. It was good to see you. And I'm looking forward to part two.
Same. Thank you, Deb. We
Love
love
you,
you.
Take
Deb.
care.